Okay, we are going to go ahead and start a new program here. It's called the Algorithm Pro Football Analysis, and we're starting off with week 5. So this is my first week doing this, and I'll walk you through elements of the program that'll be part of the discussion as we do this. So back up one. What we see here is that Denver, which is on the right here, is again, the average right around 24 points compared to Indianapolis going right around 15 points. So one of the things I would point out here is what I have here in the circle is Indianapolis has a minus 28 points for versus points against, and they have a really poor rushing game. When you compare that to Denver is still in the minus. They're 0.4 and against, but notice they have a top 10 pass rank, and what I consider top 10 is efficiency. So average yards per attempt. So they are in the top 10 with their with their passing. They also have really good defense against that. That's why you see that point disparity, even though the Vegas odds have them -3. So then if we go to the next set of charts, let's break this down a little bit more. We'll go from left to right. And so if I look over here, we have Indianapolis. So if you look at this, notice run. This is Indianapolis run and pass, and the left two bar charts compared to Denver on the right. Denver is projected to be passing a little bit better. Really, they look pretty even to me. So when I come over here to the right, this is all Denver on the right side, on the top right. What you'll notice if you compare that to Indianapolis below, Denver has a lot more of an explosive offense. And as compared to Indianapolis down here, what I'll also point out is that Indianapolis isn't taking care of their quarterback very well. So you got a lot more sacks going on over here. And so with that, that's the reason why I think Denver's got a higher probability of winning there. Let's move on to the next game. This one here is going to be really close, is what I'm projecting, which is different than Vegas. Vegas has Green Bay by 8. So I'm calling this one to be a close game. Statistically, no difference between them. And I will also grant you, this model is based upon data thus far. So it's really hard to look at this and say the Green Bay Packers led by Aaron Rodgers is going to do no better than the Green Bay Packers. And we've got some indications that would point to that. And that if I look over here at the Green Bay's performance, they're not surprisingly in the top 10 in both in passing, but then also rush as well. As compared, now what I would point out though is New York has one of the best rushing games, but they're pretty deficient elsewhere. What we'll see over here is that rushing game right now is it's projecting against a mediocre Green Bay team to be really dominant. That's the reason why this is coming out to be even. However, I would also point out that if I look over here at the top right chart, it's telling me that Green Bay's got a very explosive offense as well. So with that, and when I compare that to New York not taking care of the quarterback, that's what's kind of showing the run game is giving all the benefit to New York, and then the lack of a passing game for New York, in addition to the explosiveness of Green Bay, really kind of makes it a toss-up. I'm not sure I'd be willing to take Green Bay with 8 points, but again, it's also very hard to when you're looking at Aaron Rodgers to really know what's going to happen, see what team's going to show up. So if it's a team that we've seen for the first 4 games, as it should be a close game. Moving on to the next game, we have Philadelphia versus Arizona, and when you look at Vegas, they're saying Philly by 5. I'm saying Philly by a lot more than that. It's in Arizona. And when you look at really, Philly's got a very good team this year. As you'll see, they're in number 1 in both their pass offense and their pass defense. And what really is going to drive that total, that difference here, is going to be the fact that where Philly is really good, Arizona is really bad, and that's going to lead to a model like this is going to tend to really exacerbate what some of those differences are, because that's the way a team is going to work. That's the way a game's really going to work. Do I I I would definitely say it's very possible that a 35-point game for Philadelphia is not outrageous at all. Whether or not Arizona is going to be held to 10 to 12 points, or Arizona is going to be held to 10 to 12 points is yet to be seen. Um, but I wouldn't rule it out as Kyler Murray has certainly shown that he can be stymied with a good defense. And when we look at the more detailed charts, if you look over here at the right, indeed, we see that Arizona, Kyler Murray's getting sacked a lot. And when I look over here, they haven't been explosive this year. And that's one of the things when you compare that to Philadelphia, they're very explosive. They're doing a good job protecting their quarterback, and they've got a very explosive offense as well. So that's going to combine to a model saying that this game isn't even going to be close. So I agree with the model on that one, or with Vegas on that one. Moving on to the next game, Dallas Cowboys against Los Angeles Rams. With this one here, Vegas has the Rams favored by 5.5 points. The model is really pointing out that the Rams aren't as good as this year as they were last year. So if you look over here at the right, you'll notice that the Rams offense is very poor and their rushing defense is poor. Now, granted, you look at the number one pass defense, so that's a good omen, but thus far they have not been showing it here. And so then when we come over here, when I look at the upper left and the run pass chart comparisons, Dallas is being projected to have a much stronger passing game when it comes to the Rams. Even with that strong pass defense, and what really stands out at me over here when I look to the right is the Rams aren't taking care of the quarterback. They've got a lot of sacks, and I don't see the explosiveness that the Rams used to have. That's what I'm looking over here at the right, is projecting what's the probability that they're going to be able to get a big play, either pass or run, that's more than 20 yards. And so, but then you can compare that to Dallas. They have a very explosive offense, particularly compared to the Rams, and they're doing a good job of protecting their quarterback. And that's going to lead towards two projections that have them favored to win, even though I think the Vegas odds makers tend to have a bias towards the defending Super Bowl champions. Now, being an LA Rams fan myself, I would love to see myself lose in this prediction, but thus far, given the data and the way that they've been playing, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Moving on to the next game, San Francisco against Carolina. So when I look at that one, it looks like San Francisco is favored by 6.5 points. I also show San Francisco winning by quite a bit. Obviously, the Vegas odds makers they're going to be very hesitant to say that a team has an 83% chance of winning. But that notwithstanding, obviously, when you see in the pros a point spread of 6.5 points, it means that anything can happen in the NFL, but this is one where it's heavily favored in this case. And when you look at San Francisco's numbers, they got a fantastic defense, as marked over here in the green, with their rush defense and their pass defense. Carolina does have a good pass defense, but they've got a very poor passing game, which is going to lead to low-scoring games. And you take that over here. So when we look at this, that's where you take a high run team, a very physical team like the 49ers are, as indicated by we're projecting somewhere between, realistically speaking, 120 to 150 yards rushing, compared with an explosive offense, and they take care of the quarterback. And then when you compare that to Carolina, you've got a lot of sacks going on, and you've got some explosion over here on offense, but not a whole lot. Overall, I think the running game for San Francisco is going to dominate this game. Moving on to the next game with Seattle versus New Orleans. I'm not going to lie to you, Seattle's actually impressed me more than what I would have expected this year. And Vegas is favoring New Orleans by 5. I'm not too far from that. I actually have it a little bit closer game, but not by much. When I look at some of the core data here is New Orleans actually they have a pretty good rush and passing offense, and not a bad defense. I mean, they're number 10 overall. So overall, I think they're a pretty sound team. Their win-loss record just simply isn't showing that. I think some of that's also been driven by some injuries as well. But um, as we come over here, I think what's really going to show that pull this out, it's going to be the difference is going to be just a more explosive New Orleans offense. I think that as they start to get some more continuity on their team, I think their overall strength is going to win out over Seattle. Moving on to the Chargers versus the Browns. So with that, um, the Chargers are favored to win by 2.5 points in this game. Um, I'm not showing that at all. Overall, I am showing uh, that Cleveland actually has a pretty sound team by the numbers. You know, granted, this is early in the season. I think the Chargers have a lot better team on paper than what they've shown this year. So it's always hard to predict when the real team is going to show up. But thus far, other than having a strong passing offense, they're a very poor team. Whereas when you compare that with Cleveland, as you might expect, they've got a fantastic rushing offense. And anytime you have a team that's going to be able to control the ball like that, uh, uh, against a team that has a very poor rushing defense, they're going to be able to control that game. If they control the ball, control the field position, they're going to do well. And that's exactly what we see here when we go over to the detailed charts. Is we see that Cleveland should be dominating that run game. They've got the horses to do it. And quite frankly, thus far this season, we haven't seen much out of the Chargers other than what we know is a fantastic quarterback. And so then what I would also point out is when I come down here in the number of plays, it would appear to me, and this is not to be unexpected from a team that is as strong with the run as what Cleveland is. I expect them to hold the ball and dominate possession, and with that, they should be able to win pretty easily, unless the Chargers' offenses really start to become explosive. And it's showing down here, if you look over to the right, that they do have some explosive capability. I think they're probably more explosive than what they've shown this year, but they haven't shown up this year. So until they show up, we can't really count that tag. All right, next game, Pittsburgh versus Buffalo. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think Buffalo is a fantastic team, but they haven't really shown it very well this year. Um, they are favored to win by 15.5 points, and it shows here in the data when you look at where they're ranked overall, really strong, one of the top 10 in their defenses. They should be better off in their offense in rushing and passing, but that notwithstanding, when you look at Vegas, they're saying it's a minus 14 in favor of Buffalo, and I'm showing minus 15, so it's pretty the same thing. But I certainly hope that they come out and execute to what we know that they can do. And really, when I look at these charts over here, you just see miles of difference in the pass capability, and that's really what you expect to get out of the Buffalo offense right now. Moving on to the next game, Tennessee versus Washington. I always struggle with these games because they're both poor teams. It's really hard to model teams that play erratically and poorly. And in this game, Tennessee is favored by 2.5 points. That's pretty close to what I have. My correlated point spread up here has it as -1 for Washington, so I'm showing that they're even. And when you look at this right here, my model is saying that there's statistically no difference between Tennessee and Washington. And again, they're both poor teams. And so then when I look at the Vegas point spread of -2.5, I think they're really just going with Derrick Henry on one. And so then when I come over here, I look, I do see some advantage over here in the running game, and that's probably going to. I have a feeling that Tennessee, because Derrick Henry is such a strong running back, will probably improve upon that as they go. But again, until we see it, this is kind of what the model is saying is that there's not much different between them. But the rest of their numbers, they look really evenly matched all the way across the board. So it's really hard to give any type of advantage to either team on this. Next, Miami versus the Jets. So I'm showing these games to be even as well. Quite frankly, I've been really impressed with uh, uh, the Jets have certainly been playing better than what they have in years past. I think that they've got a long ways to go yet, but they seem to be a bit of a scrappy team. Um, Vegas has Miami favored by 3.5 points. I show them a little bit more even, especially with Tua definitely being out this week. The big thing I would point out is when I still look at the overall numbers, both teams you'll notice in terms of their rankings have a lot of poor numbers. And when you look over here at Miami's, it's got a -2, or I'm sorry, it's got a ranked number 2 in their pass offense. That's definitely due to the receiving core. With Tua being out, we'll see how that goes. But New York has, a pretty good rushing defense. See how that works out in real life. The thing I would point out is Miami is not surprisingly showing to have a very explosive team. So we'll see how that works out between the Jets defense and the Miami offense when they don't have Tua. But again, I am showing that this should be a closer game than what is being projected. Next game, Houston versus Jacksonville. So with that, I'm showing that Jacksonville is heavily favored to win, minus 9 points. And both the percentage and the scores match up with that. They don't always, by the way, but and then with Vegas, that's showing a -7 in favor of Jacksonville. So these two pretty closely match up. Not surprisingly, when you look at the Houston overall, not a real solid team. And there's some bright spots for Jacksonville, which is good to see, especially seeing that they've got a young quarterback and they're building that team up. So the fact that they've got a pretty good point differential, they're in the positive. They've got a good defense, and they're making some good strides on their offense. With the way that those match up, and what I really point out here is when you look at the running game, a strong running game is oftentimes going to have a heavy influence over the projection of the games, and that's what we see here. Next game, Detroit versus New England. So one of the reasons why I like doing this type of a model is when you look at quarterbacks and you look at teams, some coaches, sometimes it's easy to get stuck on, a Bill Belichick or a Tom Brady. Well, how do I compensate for that? And that's one of the things I think the model really helps us do. So then when I look at what Vegas has here, Vegas has, let me find it here. All right, I'm not finding it here at the moment. They have New England favored by 3.5 points. I have them favored very closely to that as well. So -2 up here, and then right around a 3-point difference. And again, it's very close in this confidence interval. So that's a 95% confidence interval. But overall, when you look at it, Detroit has a fantastic rushing game, but a poor defense overall. But then when you come over here, you see a pretty strong passing offense for New England, but a really poor rushing defense. And so that's how, now let's see how those things are going to interact. So then when I come over here and look at these charts, overall they look pretty similar. So again, when you do the breakdown in terms of the passing, the rushing, the how well they control the ball, whether or not they get sacked, throw interceptions or fumbles, and the explosiveness, they're pretty evenly matched up all the way around. The projections show that, and that's really not too much different than what we see from the. I realize that they have New England favored as -3, but I think a lot of that's probably given the fact that they're playing at home and Bill Belichick. So overall, this looks like it's going to be a close game. Next game is Chicago Bears against the Minnesota Vikings. This is an interesting one because I'm showing that Chicago is favored to win. And quite frankly, I find this is one of the things where you look at the model and it's hard to understand. The model is saying that Chicago should win by 7.3, but Vegas has Minnesota by 7 points. So how do you square that? And it's difficult to do. Um, like I said, a lot of that's got to do on the data that we've seen thus far and how those match up against one another. When you look at it, Chicago has a strong rushing game. When you have a strong rushing game, you can control the field and control the ball. And if you're doing that, you're really able to take the ball out of the other team's hands. Minnesota does not have a particularly strong anything, and they've got some more weaknesses than what Chicago does. So with that, you've got a 3-1 Minnesota team that overall doesn't have some good-looking numbers, and you've got a 2-2 Chicago team that uh, has some ugly losses there for sure, but has also beaten San Francisco, who's a physical team, and even though they beat Houston, who is not a particularly good team, nonetheless, they've been able to make some plays. And so then when we come over here, that's where we look at when we take the way the algorithm works is what is an average team is you're looking at how well that team's average run is versus the defense's average run and what the league average is. And that's where you get that disparity. That's what we're looking at over here. Is it showing that Chicago should have a good day running the ball and be able to keep the Minnesota offense off field? That's why you get that. And then when you come over here and the visitor is Chicago, is it's going to come down to how well can they actually control the ball. They're not good at keeping the quarterback from getting sacked. But if they're running, then they should be able to do pretty good with that. And then when you come over here, look at the number of plays, they're pretty even. So it looks as though Minnesota overall, with Kirk Cousins, is certainly a fantastic quarterback, or can be. He can also be very poor. So this is one to where my model disagrees with the Vegas odds. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Atlanta versus Tampa Bay. It's always interesting again. So there's oftentimes a lot of favorite. It's hard to pick against Tom Brady. And when you look at the Vegas odds, it's got Tampa Bay by 8.5 points. I've got it being a closer game. I have no doubt that between it being Tom Brady and Tampa Bay, that adds to the odds makers wanting to add to that. However, when you look at Atlanta, they're doing very good on their offense. And then when we match that up and how that's going to work out against Tampa Bay, it's really just kind of showing that it's going to be a closer game than what we might think. Tampa Bay doesn't run the ball well at all, and they're mediocre at passing the ball. So seeing how that works out is kind of the coin flip here, but it's a slight advantage to Tampa Bay. Again, it's always hard to look at something that Tom Brady's going to do and pick against him in this case. But when I look at the numbers over here, I see a couple different things. I see Atlanta's run game should help keep them in it, help keep Tom Brady off the field. And then when I come over here, I do see that Atlanta is going to have a propensity for losing the ball. So realistically speaking, if they can run the ball well, and if they can do better than what they've been doing at controlling the ball, at holding the ball, they should be able to do pretty well. So we'll see how that one comes out. For the next game, Cincinnati versus Baltimore. So I've got a slight advantage for Baltimore in this case. And what we have with Vegas is it's showing a little bit more so than that for Baltimore. They've got -3. So I am showing somewhere between a 2 to 2.5 point favorite for Baltimore. So then when I come down and look at this, it's when you look at it, Baltimore's got a real good offense, but they've also got a really poor defense. And then when you look over at Cincinnati, they've got a really good defense, and you see a poor rushing offense. And this is one where it gets deceiving because we know that Joe Burrow is a fantastic quarterback, but right now it's just showing a middling level passing offense. So then when we come down here, again, we see that for Cincinnati, we should be seeing a good passing game from Cincinnati, but that rushing game from Baltimore gives them a lot of opportunity to control that ball and keep it out of that quarterback's hands. And then when we come down here and look, um, Joe Burrow's getting sacked a lot. And when that happens, you start getting turnovers and loss of field position, and it's really negative. Both teams are very explosive offenses. So realistically speaking, whatever team can control the ball on the running field should do well, should be the one that wins. Next, we've got Vegas versus Kansas City. I'm showing Kansas City has about a 4-point uh, advantage there. Vegas has Kansas City favored by 7 points, and I can understand that. It's a Monday night game. They're playing at home. Um, again, both of the correlated point spread and then the model aggregated points are showing about either somewhere between a 4 to 5 point spread. So the -7 in favor of Kansas City has probably also got to do with the home field advantage. What I would say though is look at the overall numbers that you see Kansas City putting up in terms of just consistency of all through the board. Offense, defense, pass, run, it's all the same. And you see that inconsistency over here with the Raiders. Then when we go through and start to do the breakdown, you look at the average run and pass between the two, they look pretty similar. They really do. A slight advantage overall for Kansas City, but what you really see the difference here is this explosion capability, this long pass plays, and what else do you expect to see from Patrick Mahomes? And then when you take that over here, that the Raiders are not protecting the quarterback, so it's really hard to do well when you have an offense that has capability, but they're just simply not able to put it together. And you're going against an explosive team that is doing a good job of protecting the quarterback and protecting the ball, and they're being consistent on all sides of the field. That's going to lead to consistent wins for Kansas City, which they've been doing for a number of years.